quick little market update, things we think people would like to know about, our investors or just general clients and contacts of ours. Something that's really becoming a bit of a trend with the rental market at the moment. City centre apartment stock is in abundance. There's a lot of supply, not great demand. I mean, at the moment, I was just checking this morning, 2,236.
Around that number.
Just apartments, just inside Birmingham city centre ring road. So literally in the heart. Doesn't include stuff all around, which is crazy. This time last year, I remember doing a report and it's about 1,200, so an extra 1,000 units on the market.
Did you say the increase was since last week?
Check last week. I think we've got a helicopter going over the top. Just the beauty of doing this outside and pretty much live. So I think the stock's gone up about 80 this week. So we've had a net increase of 80 units, which is a lot. I mean, I'm guessing the city centre has been a couple of hundred lets in the last week, which means about nearly 300 properties come on the market. So they're big numbers. However, when we put a house on, house to let, especially outside the city, it goes nuts.
2, 3 bedrooms, semi-detached, terrace, anything really.
In any area.
Residential. We're finding there's huge demand. So a few sort of case studies was Canthorpe Road.
Canthorpe was in King's Heath.
Terrace house, 2 bedrooms.
That's right. 3-bed terrace.
So 3-bed terrace.
Anything, Quinton, we had a 3 beds, and then we had 4 beds in Solihull. Anything that's just a house outside the city, unfurnished, nuts. I mean, literally where we're having to take it off the market. So we put it on, and within an hour, the phone just will not stop ringing. We're fully booked on viewings. We've got a backup waiting list. We just have to take it off. We've seen that in Birmingham City Centre before. Years ago, when the city centre was nuts. Maybe last time that happened was maybe 24, but we would have that as well in the city centre. So even when we think we're being ambitious with this price, it's nuts, and we're having to take it off, and we know it's going to be let in the first viewing. Whereas other stuff in the city, you average 1 bed, 2 bed, 3 bed flats. We put it on same rent as it was previously, and we're struggling. It's
not standing much of a chance, is it? So just before coming out to film this, my last sort of task was Sapphire Court. I've been having a look at a few of the comparables, and I've had a look. So this property, it's on a quite a long road in Digbeth, but there's 3 or 4 surrounding roads. So I've just sort of cast a net around that and a search area, and within just that block that Sapphire Court sits on, there are 35 2-bedroom apartments available to rent, and 4 of them are let. So an additional 4, so 39 in total. 35 still available, 4 of them left. Just over 10%. We've got a property there that we're trying to move for this landlord. He's just bought it. Investment. He's not based in Birmingham, but heard all about how Birmingham city centre's up and coming, and was told that he'd achieve 1,600. Realistically, it's looking closer to 1,200.
Big drop. 25%.
But this is where we say that. There's a lot of negativity, especially when you're talking to people with inside the city centre. But actually, that isn't the picture for everybody. And so I think the purpose of this is to kind of say, look, the investment market isn't dead. It's very, very difficult at the moment, but there's still very much a lot of life left on the suburbs.
Your family houses, a bit, A lot of people just think city centre, leasehold apartments, less hassle, less work, but it's not always the case actually. Quite often with houses as well, you get tenants who stay longer because they're usually going to be more settled. It's much more common to be unfurnished, so again, you're not having to buy new furniture and replenish that every time tenants move out. So that's a help.
We're finding also that the yields in general are a bit stronger on freehold stock outside of the city, just because you've not got your service charges, your ground rent, for instance, which when the market is good in the city centre and you've got a week void a year maximum, you don't really mind all that much. You can take it on the chin a little bit. But when your average property now, the void period in the city centre is starting to increase, that's an added cost that you've then got to think, right, okay, well, if my property sits empty for a month, that's a month's service charge, a mortgage payment, council tax. So generally speaking, at the moment, we're finding that yields are stronger on the outskirts, on the suburbs.
There's a few other. There's plenty of pros and cons to both sides really. Other ones being, if there's a problem in the block that's causing an issue to your apartment, for example, a leak in between two apartments or a leak from the windows, can take you a lot longer to sort out. And with tenants now able to give 2 months notice, if there's a problem in their flat, they'll just serve notice and move, and then you're stuck trying to let somewhere with a problem, and you're waiting on your block manager and things like that to fix it. Whereas if it's a house, you can just get it done.
We've got the perfect example for that. I'm going to keep linking these things into kind of real life experiences and things that we've worked on. But Dakota last week,
literally Dakota,
is the prime example of that. So another agent within the city centre, they've had a tenant in this property for a year. Did you say? I think it was
just over 14 months.
14 months. And they've been trying to get the managing agents of the building to come out and repair a leak that's coming from above, but it's fallen on deaf ears so far. When we went into this property earlier this week, there was not much ceiling that was painted white, really, was there?
This isn't a property we manage, but we do our sister company, which is maintenance. We were brought in for that purpose. Obviously, it's a different agent that manages it. Otherwise, we would have been able to fix it much sooner.
But 14 months that tenant's been in there with an issue. Their ceiling is black with mould, and no fault of the agent really, other than perhaps probably should have moved the tenant out a little bit sooner.
Probably.
But they've been chasing the managing agent of the building for, well, she said 14 months. So, and she's from meeting her seems pretty relentless. So, it just goes to show that sometimes even with an apartment can be a little bit out of your control. I think what we're trying to say, we don't want to put anybody off buying leasehold city centre stuff by any means, because it certainly has their pros. When the market's strong, they let within days sometimes of going on the market.
We know that the city centre stock market's struggling for sale, and there is a knock-on effect that the other parts of the sales market outside the city isn't as strong. So for those that are looking for good deals, you're looking to buy, you're looking to increase your stock, and maybe got your fingers burnt, or you've got a large portfolio in city centre already, or just starting out, it's definitely worth looking at houses as well.
I think something that you mentioned earlier in the week when we were having a chat, which has stuck in my mind, was the average age of home movers increasing as well, which I hadn't really thought about, to be honest. But like you said, the average person now not leaving home till sort of early 30s.
Well, not buying their own home until 30.
But the same with renting. I think a lot of people are staying at home, saving up for as long as they can until they desperately need to get out from
under mum and dad's
roof.
house. Yeah.
And by the time that they're moving out, I suppose they're kind of that city centre lifestyle phase has maybe passed them by.
True, yeah.
So we're effectively potentially missing out on an entire generation of renters in the city centre that are now bypassing that and going straight towards a house instead. So there's just a few changing things, and I think you've probably heard from various sources and agents. Sorry guys, that helicopter's back, but hopefully these mics are doing their jobs. Straight ahead, you might actually get that on the camera. I don't know, but you've probably heard as well that COVID and the lockdowns had such an adverse effect on renters' requirements and demands, and whereas pre-2020 all people really knew was, right, well, I'm in the office 5 days a week, I work around the Cornwall business district,
I'm just going back to my apartment to sleep.
It makes sense for me to be in the jewellery quarter in the city centre, 10 minutes to work, whereas now we're still finding that a lot of offices haven't fully brought back in 5-day working weeks. If somebody's in the office 3 days a week, for instance, they're now having that conversation and thinking to themselves, well, is it worth me cutting down that commute for a 3-day working week when actually
the majority of the time
near a park, I
can get a dog,
and I can still get into the city centre within 15-20 minutes on many occasions.
So I think quite often people see reports, they'll say to us, I see Birmingham's up 30% because they've seen a headline report. Why is my apartment struggling, or whatever it is? It's because there's isolated spots. So if you are thinking capital growth as well, it's good to isolate a good spot where you can rent, quite often people just look at yield. They'll say, well, I get 7% here, only 5.5% here. But if the one that's 5.5% is growing 5-6% on capital growth every year, you're making all that back. Whereas the other one might say, if it's stagnant or even negative growth at the moment, which we've seen quite a lot, you've lost out on quite a big chunk. Capital growth is important to consider. And if you are looking for that, we had this chat with someone we did a seminar with the other day, and he was like, what areas would you look in? We can't give every area in the country. We basically said to a good rule of thumb is to look for spots that might be between two other affluent areas or in the middle of maybe 3 or 4 affluent areas. A good example, we've just sold a property in Sturchley actually, and that's up 35% in 5 years since it was purchased. It's a new home, so that would have been quite possibly purchased over the price originally anyway. Because when you buy a new home, you pay a small premium compared, and that's still risen nearly 40%. I think it's like 37.5%. You'd agree.
The area's just obviously taken that.
Area's taken off, and the reason being, you've got King's Heath next door, which was a very affluent area and was growing out, and then it was sandwiched between Bourneville, which again was a very affluent area, and that was growing out. So it was natural that both areas would converge in the middle to create that, then for Sturchley to really boom.
Sort of like the overspill, the excess demand.
Yeah, it always moves out. Wealth always moves out. So if you can be in between 2 or 3 wealthy spots that are moving and capitalize with that, you would have done really well.
Sure.
So if their yield was maybe 1% lower than somewhere else, but you've gained 7 or 8% capital growth every year, it makes a big difference to overall investment.
I think in saying that as well, again, I suppose it's a little bit of a I'm not going to say a negative spin on the city centre market. It's just what we're experiencing. It's the reality.
It won't last forever.
However,
it's not just Birmingham, by the way.
It's not just Birmingham. However, there are also some fantastic deals available at the moment. We've heard of portfolio transactions being acquired. Where the cost per unit is astronomically low, and so therefore the yields are ridiculously
really good again.
Yeah. So
perfect example. I said to someone the other day. Said, "I'm thinking of selling because, the market's dropped so much." And I said, "Well, if you bought a place in 2007, by 2008, after the crash, and you've lost 40%, you probably felt like you made a terrible decision. And if you sold, you would have lost 40-50% of your money. But if you'd kept that through that crash, if you could, and then you kept it till 2015, 2016, and you said to someone, then I bought this in 2007, they would have said, oh, wow, what a great investment.
Genius.
Yeah, you're a genius. You've made so much money. But at 2008, 2009, and 10, you probably would have thought it was a terrible one. So, look, we're in it now. Yeah. And in 5-10 years, you'll look like an expert again if you did buy in that time.
The key for anybody that's watching this that has got a property in the city centre, I'm going to be saying don't panic because, I do see that perhaps we're going to be approaching the end of a cycle somewhat in the next sort of year or two, where I do think that life will start coming back towards the city centre. I hope. I think that's my prediction.
Demand and the demand.
As everything sort of levels out again, cities are always going to be popular. You've still got things like HS2, which I think inflated the prices prematurely.
Yeah, a bit early.
So
I remember 2016. People were like, "Oh, the market's going to go up to HS2." We're still nowhere near seeing HS2 being ready. No. So it tells you how far off we were.
But I think the general consensus across the UK, from what I can see at the moment with things like the Rightmove price index, is that the general market is struggling a little bit. I think the stat that I saw earlier was that month-on-month drop for July is on average year-on-year 0.2%. This year, the drop into July has been 10%. So, it's common for prices to drop slightly in July just because the demand is less. People are away on holidays, but a 0.2% drop is just, minor correction, whereas a 10% drop is actually quite a significant change.
I mean, some of the report was out. We'll put a link in.
10%, sorry, 1%.
1%. It came out. We'll put a link. It was about London boroughs, and like Mayfair's down 57%, and Kensington down 54% from highs in just before COVID. We're at similar levels here in Birmingham. If I said to someone in 2019, you could buy this flat half price, say it was crazy, you take it all day long. So we're there now. So if you are thinking you want a portfolio long term, 20-year investment, it couldn't be a better time. You're literally getting 50% off. Come to market, buy it, forget about it. I speak to some people who say, I want to sell. I said, what was your idea when you bought it? You're going to keep it, put it in your pension, leave it to your kids in 20, 30 years' time. Even better time to buy now. So instead of selling what you've got, it's probably better to double down.
When you're having conversations with investors, I don't know if this is your experience as well, but I've quite often found that they don't account for the rent that they've achieved during the period as well.
No, they think that
It's very much, well, I bought it at this, say I bought it at 200, and I don't want to sell it for less than that. You know,
I don't want to lose out.
I don't want to lose out.
Really,
but actually, they're not accounting for 10 years worth of rent at, say, you know, £15,000 a year. Actually, that's obviously the purpose of the investment was to generate some cash flow and to see appreciation.
And also, the purpose was to hold it for a long time. People weren't buying investment properties to hold for 3 or 4 years. So now that the market has turned, for 3-4 years in, people think it's the time to sell. And really,
you know, the people that are kind of finding themselves in a tricky position
Too
now, I
much,
suppose, are the short-term investors that bought maybe 3 years ago. Whereas anybody that bought with a long-term plan, say 10, 15 years ago, they're obviously, you know, although the market's struggling now, they're probably seeing prices better than where they were.
yeah, it'd be a good time to buy some more, really.
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
Quite possibly. Or if not, some houses, because, like we say, you know,
they're really strong on the letting side. Anyways, we've got options. If this was interesting to you, you've got any questions, let us know.
If you're a landlord yourself and you want a little bit of advice about what's happening, whether that's in Birmingham or just further afield, and you just want a little bit of advice on kind of what we're doing a little bit differently to kind of secure longer term, better quality tenants, because you know, with the renters reform bill, that's vitally important.
Yeah, we can go through all the pros and cons of a house to an apartment, a freehold to a leasehold. We can go through all of that because we experience both all the time.
So we're going to certainly try to do, hopefully this provides value to, even if it's just one person, we're going to try and do a few more sort of long form content videos where we talk about the market in a little bit more depth. And
obviously, like the video, please. We don't want to be those guys, but every video I watch on YouTube, they say like,
comment, subscribe.
Yeah, you don't have to share.
No,
obviously, you don't have to subscribe, but comment if you've got questions, and obviously, please thumbs up helps just with the algorithm.
Absolutely.
Right.
I don't know much about that, but
that's it.
But yeah, any questions, like Mike says, leave them in the comments, and we'll get back to you there.
Sweet.